I am Karina, 29, and at 16, my parents kicked me out of the house at 3 in the morning because the police arrested my brother, and somehow, they decided it was my fault. Before I tell you about the moment I made them regret every single decision they made that night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I always love seeing how far this story travels. It started with a pounding on the door that shook the entire frame of the house. You know that sound? It's not the knock of a neighbor returning a borrowed cup of sugar. It's not the delivery driver. It is the authoritative, demanding thud of law enforcement. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The digital clock on my nightstand read 2:14 a.m. Outside, my bedroom window was awash in a chaotic rhythm of red and blue lights. They sliced through the darkness of our quiet suburban street, reflecting off the pristine siding of the neighbors' houses. I crept to the window and looked down. 3 squad cars were parked in our driveway. And there was Jackson. My little brother. The golden child. He was being led down the front walk, his hands cuffed behind his back, his head hung low. But even from the second floor, I could see he wasn't crying. He looked annoyed. Like this was a major inconvenience to his night rather than a life-altering event. I threw on a robe and ran downstairs. My mother, Janet, was standing in the foyer. She wasn't looking at Jackson. She wasn't looking at the officers. She was staring at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for me. The moment my foot touched the ground floor, she moved. She crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, and before I could ask what was happening, her hand connected with my cheek. Crack. The sound was louder than the sirens outside. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate, hot and sharp, radiating up to my eye and down to my jaw. I stumbled back, clutching my face, staring at her in absolute shock. "Where were you?" she hissed. Her voice was low, trembling with a rage I had never seen directed at anyone but me. "Where were you when your brother left the house?" I was sleeping," I stammered, tears instantly welling up. "Mom, it's 2 in the morning. I was asleep." "What happened?" My father, David, was standing by the open door, talking to a stern-looking officer. He looked back at us, his face pale, but he didn't step in. He never stepped in. "Jackson is being arrested, Karina," my mother spat the words out like poison. "Burglary. Vandalism. He and those friends of his broke into the high school. They destroyed the principal's office. Thousands of dollars in damage." My stomach dropped. I had warned them. A week ago, I found a bag of spray paint and a crowbar under Jackson's bed. I brought it to them. I told them Jackson was hanging out with Brandon and Kevin, kids who had already been to juvenile detention. And what did my mother say then? She told me to stop being jealous of my brother's popularity. She told me to stop snooping. "I told you," I whispered, the injustice bubbling up in my throat. "I told you he was, don't you dare." She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "You are the older sister. It is your job to set an example. It is your job to look out for him. If you weren't so obsessed with your grades and your little job at the grocery store, you would have noticed he was slipping away. You created this environment, Karina. You make him feel inferior, so he acts out." I looked at my father, begging for help. "Dad? You can't be serious." David sighed, rubbing his temples. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "Karina, your mother is right. You're the influence here. Jackson looks up to you, and you're cold. You're distant. You drove him to this." I stood there, the imprint of my mother's hand burning on my face, realizing that in their twisted reality, Jackson committing a felony was somehow the fault of me sleeping in my own bed. The police took Jackson away. The neighbors were all on their porches, watching the spectacle. The shame radiating off my parents was palpable. But they weren't ashamed of Jackson. They were ashamed that their image was being tarnished. And they needed a scapegoat to purge that shame. They needed to cleanse the house. The decision was made within the hour. While Jackson was being processed at the station, where my father had already called his lawyer buddy to start pulling strings, my mother marched into my room. "Pack a bag," she ordered. "What? Why? Where are we going?" "Not we. You," she said, pulling my suitcase out of the closet and throwing it onto the bed. "You're going to your Aunt Julie's in Pennsylvania. Tonight." "Pennsylvania?" I gasped. "That's 6 hours away. I have school tomorrow. I have a history AP exam." "Mom, you can't do this. You should have thought about that before you let your brother ruin his life," she said coldly, starting to sweep things off my dresser into the bag. "We need to focus on Jackson right now. He needs our full attention, our full support. We can't have your negative energy here. We can't have you judging him every time he walks into a room. You are a bad influence, Karina." I tried to fight. I cried. I begged. I screamed that it wasn't fair. But my father came in, grabbed my phone from my hand, and put it in his pocket. "You won't be needing this," he said. "Julie and Robert live simply. No distractions. Maybe some hard work will teach you what it means to be part of a family." "I am part of this family," I screamed. "Not right now, you're not," he said. At 4 a.m., I was in the back seat of my father's sedan. My entire life, my clothes, my textbooks, my few precious photos, was stuffed into 2 duffel bags in the trunk. I watched my house disappear in the rearview mirror. I watched the window of Jackson's room, dark and empty. He would be bailed out by morning. He would be sleeping in his own bed by tomorrow night. He would get a slap on the wrist. And I was being exiled. The drive was silent. 6 hours of suffocating silence. My father didn't turn on the radio. He didn't speak to me. He just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, as if I were the criminal he was transporting to prison. I stared out the window as the suburban landscape gave way to highways, then to rolling hills, and finally to the rural farmland of Pennsylvania. I felt a hollow ache in my chest that was so deep I thought it might kill me. It wasn't just the unfairness. It was the realization that my parents didn't love me. Not really. Not the way they loved Jackson. To them, I was disposable. I was an accessory to their perfect family image, and the moment I didn't fit the narrative, they cut me out. We pulled up to a gravel driveway around 10 a.m. It was a modest farmhouse, white paint peeling slightly, surrounded by miles of cornfields. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert were waiting on the porch. I hadn't seen them in years. My mother always called them the hillbillies and refused to visit. My father got out, popped the trunk, and dumped my bags on the gravel. He didn't even carry them to the porch. Aunt Julie walked down, her face stern, wiping her hands on her apron. "David," she nodded. "She's your problem now, Julie," my father said, not even looking at me as I climbed out of the car, stiff and red-eyed. "We'll send a check for her food. Just keep her away from us until we figure out the legal mess with Jackson." "You're making a mistake, David," Uncle Robert said, his voice deep and gravelly. He was a big man, weathered by the sun. "Blaming the girl for the boy's sins. God don't like ugly." "Spare me the sermon, Robert," Dad snapped. He got back in the car. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't tell me when I could come home. He just put the car in reverse, kicked up a cloud of dust, and sped away. I stood there in the dust, clutching my elbows, shivering despite the morning sun. I was 16 years old. I had no phone. No money. No parents. I felt like I had been severed from the earth, floating in a void of absolute abandonment. Aunt Julie stepped forward and picked up one of my bags. She didn't hug me immediately. She looked me up and down, seeing the bruise starting to form on my cheek where my mother had slapped me. Her expression softened, her eyes filling with a mixture of pity and fury. "Well," she said softly. "I reckon you're hungry. Come on inside, Karina. We've got hot cakes." I watched the dust settle where my father's car had vanished. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The little girl who wanted to please mommy and daddy died on that gravel driveway. And something else began to take her place. Something colder. Something harder. The first week at the farm was a shock to my system, mostly because of the silence. In the suburbs, there was always noise, traffic, lawnmowers, the constant hum of the television. Here, at night, it was so quiet I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I expected Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert to treat me like a prisoner. After all, that's what my parents had told them I was, a delinquent, a bad influence, a problem to be managed. But they didn't. They treated me like a person. "We don't have free rides here," Uncle Robert told me the first morning at breakfast. He placed a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me. "You eat what we eat, you work when we work. But we don't hit, and we don't yell. You do your part, you'll be fine." My part turned out to be hard labor. Real work. Feeding the chickens at dawn, weeding the massive vegetable garden, helping Aunt Julie can preserves. My hands, which were used to holding pens and typing on laptops, became blistered and raw within 3 days. My back ached constantly. But strangely, I loved it. There was an honesty to the work. You pulled a weed, it was gone. You fed a chicken, it laid an egg. It was simple cause and effect, logic that was entirely missing from my life with my parents. In my old house, no matter how straight my A's were, no matter how clean I kept my room, it was never enough. Jackson could set the curtains on fire and get a hug. I could win a spelling bee and get criticized for my posture. One evening, about 2 weeks into my exile, I was sitting on the porch shelling peas with Aunt Julie. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of purple and orange. "Your mama called today," Julie said, not looking up from the bowl. My heart skipped a beat. "Did she say when I can come home?" Julie stopped her work. She looked at me, her eyes sad. "She called to tell us not to let you use the landline. Said she doesn't want you contacting Jackson. Apparently, his lawyer is trying to get him a plea deal, and they don't want you interfering with his stress levels." I felt the tears prickling my eyes, hot and stinging. "I didn't do anything, Aunt Julie. I swear. Jackson was the one who broke into the school. I was asleep." "I know, honey," Julie reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was rough, calloused, but incredibly warm. "Robert and we know what your sister is like. Janet has always needed everything to be perfect on the surface. And when it ain't, she looks for someone to blame. Usually the strongest one, 'cause she knows they can take it." "I'm not strong," I whispered, a tear sliding down my cheek. "I'm alone." "You ain't alone," she said firmly. "And you are strong. You're surviving this, aren't you?" That night, lying in the guest room staring at the ceiling, I realized I had 2 choices. I could let this destroy me, let myself wither away waiting for an apology that would never come. Or I could build a life that was so undeniable, so successful, that they couldn't touch me. The real breaking point, the moment that severed the emotional cord forever, came a month later. I needed money for school supplies. The local high school in Pennsylvania had accepted my transfer, but I needed notebooks, a calculator, and new shoes since my old ones were ruined by the farm work. I knew I had savings. I had been working at the grocery store back home for 2 years, saving every penny for college. I had about $4,500 in a joint account that my father was also signed on. I asked Uncle Robert to drive me to the bank in town. I walked up to the teller, a nice lady with cat-eye glasses, and handed her my withdrawal slip. "I'd like to take out $200, please," I said politely. She typed on her computer, frowned, and typed again. I'm sorry, sweetie. This account is empty. I froze. What? No, that can't be right. There should be over $4,000 in there. She turned the screen toward me. There was a withdrawal 3 weeks ago. Electronic transfer. It looks like. David Stevens transferred the full balance to an account ending in 4490. My knees went weak. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. Account 4490. That was Jackson's account. I walked out of the bank feeling like I had been punched in the gut. I sat in Uncle Robert's truck, staring at the dashboard, unable to breathe. What's wrong, kid? Robert asked, noticing my pale face. They took it, I whispered. My college fund. My work money. They took it all. Robert's jaw tightened. Who did? My parents. They gave it to Jackson. Later, I found out through a cousin that my parents had used my money, my hard-earned money from sweeping floors and stocking shelves, to pay for the damages Jackson caused at the high school so the principal would drop the charges. They stole my future to pay for his crime. I didn't cry this time. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in the pit of my stomach. That was the day I stopped being their daughter. Take me to the library, Uncle Robert, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Even and flat. Library. You don't want to go get some ice cream or something? No, I said. I need to find out how to get a scholarship. Because I'm going to college. And I'm going to do it without a single cent from them. That betrayal was the fuel. Every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to quit, I remembered that empty bank account. I remembered them stealing my sweat and labor to cushion their precious golden child. I threw myself into my new school with a ferocity that scared the other students. I didn't make friends. I didn't go to parties. I studied. I worked in the school cafeteria for free lunch. I helped Uncle Robert fix the tractor on weekends for spare cash. One afternoon, the English teacher, Mr. Henderson, pulled me aside. Karina, you have a very aggressive writing style, he said, holding my essay. You argue your points like you're trying to dismantle the opposition piece by piece. Is that a bad thing? I asked defensively. He smiled. No. It's a lawyer thing. Have you considered joining the debate team? That suggestion changed the trajectory of my life. The debate team became my sanctuary. It was a place where facts mattered more than feelings. Where logic won. Where the truth could be proven if you had the right evidence. It was the antithesis of my parents' house. I became obsessed with the law. I read books on torts and criminal procedure before I could even drive. I realized that the law was a weapon. It was a shield. And if I mastered it, no one, not my parents, not the police, not the world, could ever victimize me again without a fight. I graduated high school 2 years later. Valedictorian. I didn't invite my parents to the ceremony. Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert sat in the front row, beaming, Uncle Robert wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. When I walked across that stage, I looked at the empty seats where my real family should have been, and I felt nothing. No pain. No longing. Just the satisfaction of knowing I did this alone. I got a full ride to a prestigious university, and then, eventually, to Yale Law School. Throughout those years, the silence from my parents was deafening. I heard snippets of news. Jackson had dropped out of community college. Jackson had gotten a girl pregnant but took care of it. Jackson was finding himself. They were too busy managing the chaos of his life to notice that their daughter was becoming a shark. University was not the glamorous party life you see in movies. For me, it was a battlefield. While my classmates were rushing sororities and planning spring break trips to Cancun, I was working 3 jobs. I was a waitress at a diner from 6 p.m. to midnight. I was a research assistant for a strict constitutional law professor from 8 a.m. to noon. And on weekends, I tutored rich kids who couldn't be bothered to read their own textbooks. I had to. Even with the tuition scholarship, I had to pay for rent, food, books, and the suit I needed for internships. The salary I made, if you could call it that, barely covered the basics. There were nights I ate peanut butter out of the jar for dinner because I couldn't afford bread. But I never called home. Not once. There was one moment in my junior year of college that tested my resolve. I was hospitalized for severe exhaustion and pneumonia. I lay in that hospital bed, hooked up to N4, feeling smaller and weaker than I had since the night of the arrest. The nurse asked for emergency contact information. "Is there a parent we can call?" she asked gently. I looked at the phone on the bedside table. I knew the number by heart. One call and maybe my mother would come. Maybe she would bring soup. Maybe, just for a moment, she would be a mom. Then I remembered the bank account. I remembered the slap. "No," I told the nurse. "Call Julie Stevens. My aunt." Aunt Julie drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to sit by my bed. She brought homemade broth and sat there knitting while I slept. That was when I realized that family isn't about whose DNA you share. It's about who shows up when you're hooked up to machines and can't breathe. I recovered. I went back to work. And I got into law school. Law school was where I truly honed my edge. I specialized in criminal defense, specifically focusing on complex financial crimes and family law. I wanted to understand the mechanisms of manipulation. I wanted to know exactly how people hide the truth, and how to dig it out. I met Sarah in my second year. She was everything I wasn't, bubbly, coming from a wealthy family, driving a convertible. But she saw something in me. "You're intense, Karina," she told me over coffee one day. "You study like you're trying to kill the textbook." "I don't have a safety net, Sarah," I replied without looking up. "If I fall, I hit the concrete. There's no one to catch me." "Well," she said, sliding a muffin onto my plate. "I've got pretty good reflexes. I might catch you." We became inseparable. She was the first person I told about Jackson and my parents. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She just said, "They sound like narcissists. You're better off." By the time I graduated law school, I had offers from 3 top firms in New York. I chose Sterling and Partners because Mr. Sterling, the managing partner, was known as the Wolf. He was ruthless, brilliant, and fair. During the interview, he looked at my resume. Valedictorian. Law review. No extracurriculars except work. Why? Because I needed the money, sir, I said directly. I don't have family support. He looked at me over his glasses. Hunger makes the best lawyers, Ms. Stevens. People who have everything handed to them tend to be lazy. I have a feeling you don't know the meaning of the word lazy. I don't, sir. You're hired. 5 years passed in a blur of billable hours, court appearances, and victories. I became known as the Ice Queen in the courtroom. I didn't get emotional. I didn't get flustered. I presented facts with surgical precision. Meanwhile, through the grapevine of social media, which I monitored from a fake account, I watched my original family disintegrate. Jackson was 27 now. He still lived at home. He had gone through 4 different careers: DJ, personal trainer, crypto investor, and now, apparently, he was working in accounts receivable at a mid-sized logistics company. My parents looked 10 years older than they should have. My mother's posts were always frantic attempts to paint a perfect picture, so proud of Jackson for his new job. My baby is finally settling down. It was pathetic. But it was also dangerous. I knew deep down that the other shoe was going to drop. You don't raise a child to believe they are above the rules, and then expect them to follow the law. I just didn't expect the shoe to drop right on my doorstep. At 29, I was made a junior partner. It was unheard of at my age, but I had just won a massive class action lawsuit involving corporate negligence that brought the firm millions. My life was unrecognizable from the girl on the farm. I lived in a glass-walled condo in Manhattan overlooking the Hudson River. I drove a sleek, silver Audi, bought with my own money, title in my name. I wore tailored suits that cost more than my parents' car. But I kept my circle small. Aunt Julie, Uncle Robert, who I flew out to visit twice a year, Sarah, and Mr. Sterling. I didn't date much. I didn't trust easily. Men often found my independence intimidating, or they tried to save me, not realizing I had already saved myself. It was a Tuesday in November. The sky was gray and spitting rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. I was reviewing a deposition for a new case, a divorce settlement where the husband was hiding assets in offshore accounts. Classic greed. Inheritance is a tricky thing, Mr. Sterling said, walking into my office without knocking. He held 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one. Black, 2 sugars. Thanks, Arthur, I said. What's up? You have a consultation in 10 minutes. Walk in. High priority referral from a judge I know. I frowned. I don't do walk-ins. My schedule is booked until February. I know. But this one is interesting. And the judge called in a personal favor. Said it's an elderly couple, frantic. Their son is in big trouble. Embezzlement. They need the best. I sighed, rubbing my neck. Embezzlement. Let me guess. The son borrowed the money and meant to pay it back. Something like that, Sterling smirked. Just hear them out. If you don't like it, pass it to an associate. But give them 15 minutes. Fine, I said, checking my watch. Send them in when they arrive. I went back to my paperwork, putting the meeting out of my mind. I was thinking about the keyword search I needed to run on the opposing counsel's discovery documents. I was thinking about whether I should order Thai or Italian for dinner. I was thinking about everything except the past. 10 minutes later, my intercom buzzed. It was Elena, my secretary. Ms. Stevens. Mr. and Mrs. Stevens are here to see you. I froze. My pen hovered over the paper. Who? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, Elena repeated. Wait, that's funny. They have the same last name as you. No relation, right? My heart stopped. Then it started again, beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, the same rhythm as that night at 3 a.m. 13 years ago. Stevens. It's a common name. It could be anyone. But deep down, my gut was screaming. Send them in, I said. My voice was calm, professionally detached. But my hands were trembling. I placed them flat on the mahogany desk to steady them. I spun my large leather chair around so I was facing the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. It was a power move I rarely used, but today, I needed the armor. I needed a moment to compose my face. I heard the heavy oak door open. I heard the shuffle of feet on the plush carpet. Oh my, a woman's voice whispered. This office, it's incredible. David, look at this view. That voice. It had been 13 years, but the sound of it sent a shiver down my spine that felt like ice water. It was her. Janet. We're looking for the attorney, a man's voice grumbled. It sounded older, rougher, weary. My father. Is she here? Please have a seat, I said, keeping my chair turned away. I'll be with you in just a moment. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. I am not 16. I am not helpless. I am the senior partner of Sterling and Partners. I own this room. I own this building. I own my life. I listened to them settle into the chairs. I heard the rustle of anxiety. I hope she can help us, my mother whispered urgently. The judge said she's a shark. That she never loses. Ideally, we need someone cheap, Janet, my father hissed back. We can't afford a shark. The mortgage is already overdue. We have to save Jackson, she snapped. We'll sell the car. We'll do whatever it takes. He can't go to prison, David. He's too fragile. He won't survive in there. Fragile. The word echoed in my head. I slowly spun the chair around. The rotation of the chair felt like it was happening in slow motion. As I came into view, I saw them. They looked terrible. My mother, once obsessed with her appearance, looked frayed. Her hair was dyed a harsh, cheap yellow, and lines of worry were etched deep around her mouth. My father looked defeated, his shoulders slumped, wearing a jacket that was 2 sizes too big for his shrinking frame. They were looking at me, expecting a stranger. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Just the sound of the rain hitting the glass. My mother blinked. She squinted slightly. Then, her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. All the color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly gray. Danny, she stuttered. She used my childhood nickname. My father looked up from his hands, confused. He looked at me, then at Janet, then back at me. His jaw went slack. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father, I said. My voice was smooth, cool, devoid of any warmth. Karina. Dad croaked. Is that really you? It's Miss Stevens inside these walls, I corrected him. But yes. It's me. My mother started to rise, her hands reaching out as if to hug me. Oh my God. Karina. Look at you. David, look at her. You're a lawyer. You're the lawyer. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just pointed to the chair. Sit down. The command was sharp. She froze, then slowly sank back into the seat. The joy on her face flickered and died, replaced by confusion and fear. They were realizing that this wasn't a happy family reunion. This was a business meeting, and they were on the wrong side of the desk. We didn't know, Dad mumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. We heard the name K. Stevens, but we never thought. Why would you? I said, leaning back and tenting my fingers. You haven't spoken to me in 13 years. You didn't come to my high school graduation. You didn't call when I was in the hospital. You didn't know I went to Yale. Why would you know I'm the partner at the firm you're trying to hire? My mother flinched at the word Yale. We wanted to call Karina. But we thought you needed space. We thought you were happy on the farm. Cut the crap, Janet, I said. The profanity shocked them. You're here because you need a defense attorney. Elena said it's urgent. So, tell me. What did Jackson do this time? Did he graffiti another school? Or is it something bigger? They exchanged a look of pure desperation. It's a misunderstanding, my father said, trying to regain some dignity. He works for a logistics company. There was some money missing. About $45,000. 45,000, I repeated. And let me guess. The police found it in his account. He was just holding it. Mom cried out. He was going to invest it and pay it back. He just wanted to help us. He wanted to prove he could make money. So he embezzled company funds to gamble on crypto or stocks. I guessed. Their silence confirmed it. And now he's facing charges. Grand larceny. Embezzlement. And fraud, Dad whispered, looking at the floor. He forged the CFO's signature on the transfer checks. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Forgery too. He's looking at 5 to 10 years, minimum. Federal prison if they cross state lines. That's why we need you. Mom leaned forward, tears streaming down her face. The same face that had looked at me with such hatred the night she slapped me. Now it was begging. Karina, please. You have to help him. You're the best. We heard you beat the pharmaceutical companies. You can fix this. He's your brother. My brother, I mused. The brother who watched you throw me out at 3 a.m. and went back to sleep. The brother whose freedom was bought with my college fund. They froze. You knew about that? Dad asked weakly. Of course I knew, I said. Did you think I wouldn't notice my life savings disappearing? Did you think I wouldn't find out you stole from me to save him? We didn't steal. Mom protested. We used it for the family. We were going to pay you back. But you didn't, I said. You never sent a dime. You let Aunt Julie and Uncle Robert feed me and clothe me. You let me scrub floors to pay for my books. We were struggling. Mom sobbed. Jackson needed therapy. He needed help. Jackson needed discipline. I slammed my hand on the desk, making them jump. And because you never gave it to him, because you bailed him out every single time, he's now a 27-year-old criminal facing a decade behind bars. This isn't a mistake, Mother. This is the result of your parenting. The room fell silent. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Please, Dad said, his voice breaking. Karina. We have no money. Jackson gambled away his savings. We mortgaged the house to pay his bail last time. If he goes to prison, if we have to pay restitution, we lose everything. We'll be homeless. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the fear in their eyes. The inheritance they hoped to leave Jackson was gone. Their retirement was gone. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, and I was the only person with a rope. So I said softly. You want me to represent him? You want me to use my skills, my reputation, and my time to save the person who ruined my childhood? Yes, Mom whispered. Please. For family. I picked up the file on my desk. I opened it. I pretended to read it for a moment. My hourly rate is $850, I said. And I require a $50,000 retainer up front. We can't afford that, Dad said. We were hoping family discount. I snapped the folder shut. Family discount. I repeated the words, tasting the bitterness on my tongue. You want a discount based on a relationship you terminated 13 years ago. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I felt a surge of power, but it wasn't the vindictive kind I thought it would be. It was clarity. Let me tell you a story, I said, my back to them. There was a girl. 16 years old. Smart, hard-working. She had saved $4,000 scrubbing toilets and stocking shelves. She wanted to be a doctor, or maybe a writer. But one night, her parents decided she was disposable. They stole her money. They stole her home. They stole her voice. I turned around to face them. That girl died in a cornfield in Pennsylvania, I said. The woman standing in front of you. I'm not your daughter. I'm a lawyer. And as a lawyer, I have to evaluate the risk of taking a client. Karina, stop it, Mom cried. We're your parents. Biologically, yes, I said. But you taught me a very important lesson that night. You taught me that actions have consequences. Well, almost. You taught me that. You never taught Jackson that. I walked back to my desk and pressed the intercom button. Elena, could you please print out a list of public defenders in the tri-state area? And bring security to the conference room door, just in case. Security. Dad stood up, his face red. You're calling security on your own father. You lost the right to that title when you dumped me on a gravel driveway like a bag of trash, I said, my voice steady as steel. I am declining this case. I have a conflict of interest. Conflict? Mom asked. What conflict? My interest is in seeing justice served, I said. And justice, in this case, looks like Jackson finally facing the consequences of his actions. I won't help you bury this. I won't help you enable him one more time. You heartless bitch. Mom screamed. The mask finally fell. The tearful, pleading mother vanished, replaced by the monster I remembered. After all we did for you. We gave you life. You owe us. I owe you nothing. I shouted back, finally letting my own anger surface. I paid my debt. I paid it with 13 years of silence. I paid it with every holiday I spent alone. I paid it with my college fund that you stole. We are even. The door opened. 2 large security guards in suits stood there, looking at me for instruction. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Stevens out, I said calmly. And ensure they are banned from the building. You'll regret this. Mom shrieked as the guard took her arm. He's your brother. If he goes to prison, it's on your head. You're killing this family. The family was dead the minute you chose him over me, I said. Dad stopped at the door. He looked back at me. For a second, I saw profound regret in his eyes. A realization of exactly what he had thrown away. You look like your grandmother, he whispered. Goodbye, David, I said. They were dragged out. The door clicked shut. The silence returned to the office. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would feel sad. But I didn't. I felt light. I felt like a heavy coat I had been wearing for 13 years had finally been taken off. I sat down at my desk and picked up my phone. I dialed a number. Hello, a warm, older voice answered. Hey, Aunt Julie, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Karina. Is everything okay, honey? Yeah, I smiled, tears finally spilling down my face, but they were tears of relief. Yeah, everything is great. I wanted to see if I could come visit this weekend. I really miss Uncle Robert's pancakes. You know the door is always unlocked for you, sweetie, she said. Always. I know, I said. I know who my family is. The wheels of justice turn slowly, they say, but when you strip away the money and the influence, they can crush you with terrifying speed. I didn't represent Jackson, but I was there when the gavel fell. I sat in the very back row of the courtroom, wearing dark sunglasses and a scarf, unrecognizable to the 2 hunched figures sitting behind the defense table. My parents had hired a lawyer they could barely afford, a man named Mr. Henderson who looked tired before the trial even began. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't me. He didn't know how to manipulate the narrative. He didn't know how to turn a spoilt brat into a victim of circumstance. He just had the facts, and the facts were damning. The prosecutor, a woman I had faced many times and respected immensely, didn't hold back. She painted a picture of Jackson not as a misguided youth but as a predator. A man who forged signatures with ease, who looked his employers in the eye while siphoning their profits into his own pockets. This is not a mistake, she told the jury, her voice ringing clear in the silence. This is a pattern. A lifetime of believing that rules do not apply to him. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty on all counts of embezzlement and fraud, my mother let out a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a scream. It was a gasp, like the air had been permanently sucked out of her lungs. My father just put his head in his hands. Jackson. He didn't cry. He looked around the room, bewildered, as if he was waiting for the punchline. He was waiting for Mom and Dad to fix it. He was waiting for the check to clear that would make this all go away. But the bank accounts were empty. The judge sentenced him to 24 months in a federal correctional facility, followed by 5 years of probation, and full restitution of the $45,000. It was a light sentence, all things considered. But for a family that had leveraged everything on their image, it was a death blow. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I received a notification on my phone. I had set up a Google alert for my parents' address years ago, a habit born of paranoia, I suppose. The alert was a link to a real estate listing. Foreclosure auction. They hadn't just mortgaged the house, they had taken out high-interest personal loans to pay for Jackson's previous legal issues and his gambling debts. With Jackson in prison and unable to work, and the court demanding restitution, the house of cards collapsed. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the photos of the house on my screen. That house. The pristine white siding. The manicured lawn where I wasn't allowed to play because I might ruin the grass. The window of the bedroom where I used to hide and read books. It was being sold to the highest bidder. A strange urge overtook me. I canceled my afternoon meetings, grabbed my car keys and drove. I didn't go to talk to them. I just wanted to see. I parked my Audi down the street, hidden by the shade of a large oak tree. A for sale sign was stabbed into the lawn. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. I watched as my father carried boxes out. He looked frail. He stumbled slightly under the weight of a box labeled kitchen. He was an old man now, broken by the weight of enabling a lie for 3 decades. Then I saw my mother. She was carrying a lamp, a gaudy, expensive thing she had bought when I was 12. She looked at the house one last time, before getting into their sedan. She looked angry. Even in defeat, she looked angry at the world, as if the universe had conspired against her personally. They drove away. They didn't look back. They were moving into a small, rented apartment on the other side of town, in a neighborhood they used to make fun of. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. "You okay?" I saw the news about the sentencing. "I'm fine," I typed back. And I realized I wasn't lying. I wasn't happy about their misery, I'm not a monster. But I felt a profound sense of balance. The scales had finally tipped. A month later, a letter arrived at my office. It had a prison stamp on the envelope. My assistant, Elena, brought it in with a pair of tweezers, half joking that it might be dangerous. "It's from him," she said softly. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Jackson Stevens. I opened it. The handwriting was messy, scrawled on yellow legal pad paper. "Karina, I don't expect you to write back. Mom told me you refused to help. She said you were a cold-hearted snake who forgot where you came from. For the first week in here, I hated you. I blamed you. I thought, if my rich sister just wrote a check, I wouldn't be sleeping on a cot next to a guy who snores like a chainsaw. But there's a lot of time to think in here. No phone. No internet. Just time. I realized something yesterday. I'm 27 years old, and I don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to file taxes. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to hold a job. Mom and Dad did everything. They fixed everything. They told me I was special so many times, I actually believed I didn't have to try. You were the lucky one, Karina. I know that sounds crazy. You got kicked out. You struggled. But because they threw you away, you learned how to survive. They kept me, and they suffocated me. They loved me to death. I'm useless and you're a shark. I'm not asking for money. I wanted you to know that I get it now. You were right to leave. You were right to stay away. Don't tell Mom I wrote this. She still thinks we're the victims." Jackson. I read the letter 3 times. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, aching pity. Jackson was right. He was the product of their creation. They had built a statue out of sand, and they were shocked when the tide came in and washed it away. I took a lighter from my desk drawer. I didn't smoke, but I kept it for candles, and I walked to the window. I held the corner of the yellow paper and flicked the flame. I watched the letter curl into ash. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need his apology. And I certainly didn't need to be drawn back into the triangle of dysfunction. I let the ashes fall into the metal wastebasket. "Elena," I called out on the intercom. "Yes, Ms. Stevens." "Schedule a meeting with the partners. I want to discuss the pro bono initiative for next year. I want to expand our scholarship fund for at-risk youth." "On it," she said. That was the end of the fallout. The debris had settled. My parents were gone from my life, living in the reality they had created. Jackson was serving his time. And I was free. Truly free. Not just physically but mentally. The ghost of the bad daughter had finally been exorcised. Thanksgiving that year was different. Usually, the holidays were a time when the old wounds would ache a little. No matter how successful you are, seeing commercials of happy families gathering around turkeys can make you feel the phantom limb of the family you lost. But this year, I drove to Pennsylvania with a lightness in my chest that felt like helium. I pulled into the gravel driveway of the farm. It looked exactly the same as it did the day I was dropped off, except now, the peeling paint didn't look sad. It looked lived in. It looked like resilience. Uncle Robert was on the porch whittling a piece of wood. He stood up when he saw my car, his bad knee making him wince, but his smile was wide enough to crack his face. "There she is," he bellowed. "The big city lawyer." I got out of the car, swapping my heels for a pair of old boots I kept in the trunk. I ran up the steps and hugged him. He smelled of sawdust and tobacco, the smell of safety. "Hey, Uncle Rob," I said, burying my face in his flannel shirt. "Julie's in the kitchen," he said, patting my back. "She's been stress cooking for 3 days. We're gonna need a bigger table." Inside, the house was warm and smelled of cinnamon and roasted sage. Sarah was there with her husband and their toddler. Mr. Sterling had even driven down, looking comically out of place in his cashmere sweater, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than the tractor in the barn. And there was someone else. Sitting at the kitchen island, peeling potatoes with a look of intense concentration, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16. She had pink streaks in her hair and a piercing in her nose, but her eyes were old. They held that familiar mix of fear and defiance I knew so well. "Karina," Aunt Julie wiped her hands on her apron and came over to kiss my cheek. "I want you to meet Emily." Emily looked up. She hesitated, then gave a small, guarded wave. "Hi," she muttered. "Emily is staying with us for a while," Aunt Julie said, her eyes locking with mine. A silent communication passed between us. Another stray. Another one thrown away. I walked over to the island. I picked up a peeler. "You're peeling too deep," I said gently to Emily. "You're losing half the potato." Emily bristled immediately. "I'm doing my best, okay." I smiled. It was the same defensive tone I had used 13 years ago. "I know," I said. "I used to sit in that exact chair and butcher the potatoes too. Aunt Julie threatened to make me eat the skins if I didn't learn." Emily's eyes widened. "You lived here?" "I did," I said. "My parents kicked me out when I was your age. Dropped me off with 2 bags and no phone." Emily stopped peeling. She looked at my suit, I hadn't changed yet, and then back at my face. "But you're rich. I saw your car." "I am now," I said. "But back then, I had nothing. I was angry. I was hurt. I thought my life was over. My mom says I'm a waste of space, Emily whispered, looking down at the potato. She says I'm the reason she's unhappy. I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Your mother is wrong, I said firmly. Listen to me, Emily. Look at me. She looked up. They will try to define you, I told her, my voice steady and fierce. They will try to tell you that you are bad, or difficult, or broken because it makes them feel better about their own failures. Do not let them. You are the architect of your own life. You build the foundation. You lay the bricks. And if they don't like the house you build, they can stand outside in the rain. Emily stared at me. Her lip trembled. Can I really be like you? She asked. No, I said, grinning. Be better than me. I'm a lawyer. It's high stress. Be a doctor. Or an astronaut. Be whatever you want. But do it for you. Dinner that night was loud. There was laughter. There was arguing over politics between Uncle Robert and Mr. Sterling. The baby threw mashed potatoes on the floor. It was chaotic. It was messy. It was perfect. I looked around the table. I saw Aunt Julie, the woman who taught me that love is an action, not a word. I saw Sarah, the sister I chose. I saw Emily, the future. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Whatever it wasn't as important as this. I raised my glass of wine. A toast, I said. The table quieted down. To family, I said. The ones we're born with, who teach us resilience. And the ones we choose, who teach us love. To family, everyone echoed. As I took a sip of wine, I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the cornfields, casting long shadows across the land. Somewhere in a prison cell, my brother was sleeping. Somewhere in a small apartment, my parents were probably blaming the world for their misfortune. But here in this farmhouse, I was whole. I had survived the storm. I had navigated the wreckage. And I had built a castle out of the stones they threw at me. My name is Karina Stevens. I was the scapegoat. I was the exile. But today I am simply, finally, happy. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I share it because I know I am not the only one. If there is one lesson I want you to take away from this journey, it is this: toxic loyalty is not love. In my story, my parents used the concept of family as a weapon to control me and to enable my brother's destruction. They demanded loyalty from me while offering none in return. By walking away, I didn't destroy my family, I saved myself. You have the right to curate your life. You have the right to remove people who drain your spirit, even if they gave birth to you. You have the right to define family not by DNA, but by behavior. Real family shows up. Real family takes accountability. Real family supports your growth, rather than resenting your success. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stand your ground, and remember, the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's living a beautiful, happy life.